Hi, I'm Callie Wright, and I'm the Education Director at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Today, I'm speaking with Terry Kehoe. Terry is a Vietnam veteran who we met on the road with a wall that heals. Terry, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to speak with you. And I was wondering if you could tell me um, about your job in Vietnam and what you were doing there.
I was a sergeant, infantry sergeant, scout dog handler, and I had a dog named Prince, who he and I were called out to different units in the field in Vietnam, and we would walk point for the infantry.
Terry, can you tell me how did you become a dog handler?
It's a funny story. They, when I was in NCO school at Fort Benning, they were asking for volunteers for scout dog school. And I didn't know anything about scout dogs, except that I knew that scout dogs only went to the field for 10 to 12 days at a time. And I knew the infantry grunts were out there for 45 days. So I'm not a whiz at math, but I figured out it was better to be out there a shorter time. So when they interviewed me for that, being from Minnesota, I told them that I did a lot of things in Minnesota with sled dogs. I don't know a sled dog from another dog, but it works. And I became, I was sent to scout dog school at Fort Benning and then on to Vietnam.
What was Scout Dog School like at Fort Benning?
Scout dog school was, they tried the best they could to recreate Vietnam. That was after, the first part of the school was how to walk with a dog, how to work a dog on a leash, how to talk to a dog and all that. But the second part was the hands-on and working with the dog, crossing rivers, going through jungle type things, firing weapons, staying out in the field with the dog, all the things that we would do in Vietnam with the dog. So it was pretty realistic. The difference was that the dog I had at Fort Benning, whose name happened to be Prince, was a different dog than the dog I had in Vietnam.
And when you got to Vietnam, when did you meet your dog there, or had you already met?
No, when I first went to the 39th, and I'll say this, Infantry Platoon Scout Dog, IPSD, I walked in and, they said, welcome to our little compound, which was, we were attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade. We had our own little corner of Elsa English, and I went up there and all I saw were these buildings covered with sandbags, and I could hear dogs barking. And they said, you're going to get Prince 672M. That was his number that was tattooed in his ear. And so I went back there, and all these dogs are barking, and here's Prince sitting there, not barking, looking up with these sad eyes and wagging his tail. They said, this is your dog. And I thought, geez, these others are so active, and he isn't. And somebody said to me, be happy, you're one of the lucky ones. You got one of the better dogs. So Prince had been there for 2 years already. He was a combat veteran. I was not. I just getting to Vietnam. I didn't know what I was doing or anything. So Prince, I've always said Prince was the smart one. I was there to carry his food and water.
How did you train with Prince after you guys had just first met?
The first couple of weeks, I just spent time with him all the time. I mean, whether it be sitting and just talking, with the guys, he was very friendly. He liked people. We did some training. We had some stairs and tubes and things like that set up in the back part of the compound that we would take the dogs to, and they would train doing that sort of thing. So agility type things. And, walking with them, sit, stay, crawl. And he and I learned together to do, he already knew him and I knew him, but we worked together to work with hand signals. That was how I alerted him. And then he'd look at me and I'd give him hand signals of where I wanted him to go. Because people think it's also noisy out in the field, which it is when people start shooting their weapons. But otherwise, you try to be quiet. You're not trying to give your position away. And when we were walking point, it was very quiet. So we did all hand signals and stuff. But the training was actually out in the field also. we would go out once a week with the dogs that were not out in the field at the time. And we had a spot a few miles outside of Elsie English that was sort of like out in the field. I mean, it had brush, had some trees. It wasn't dense jungle, but we would hide somebody or something out there and then have the handler and the dog walk toward it and hope to find it.
What were some of after Prince was trained? What was the next step like?
Then Prince and I were assigned to a somebody called for a unit, and we went out. But I had to go the first time with another dog handler, a senior dog handler that went with me because they had been out in the field. I never had been, and but it all fell into place because, like I said, Prince had already been there. Prince knew what to do. He was teaching me really, and so we went out, and the first time went very well, and subsequent ones, he and I went out, just the two of us.
What were his jobs when he was out there? What did he do for you or for the unit?
Prince was like all the other scout dogs. They were trained, but also had the natural ability to smell things, see things, and hear things much better than a human being. And he was trained to find weapons, enemy personnel, booby traps, tunnels, tripwires, things like that. And he wouldn't turn around and bark at me. He would sit in facing the way of what he found, and then I had to kind of interpret what was going on, especially with the wind, if it was a scent. And then I would pull back with Prince, and the infantry grunts would go out and find whatever it was. So my job wasn't to do away with what he found. My job was to try to interpret what he found.
Were the dogs pretty accurate?
The dogs were extremely accurate. They were so good. They could find things that nobody ever would have known were out there. Prince himself, speaking for him, he did find tripwires. And if you think about a fishing line, a monofilament fishing line stretched across a path, hooked to a grenade in a can, if you walked up on it, you wouldn't see it. He knew it was there. He would either smell the person that had put it out there, or if it was stretched tight, he could hear it. I don't think he probably could see it because that clear line you can't see. But he found those, found a lot of other things too. And so basically the scout dogs in Vietnam, it's been estimated that they saved 10,000 lives. In other words, there would be, if it wasn't for scout dogs, there'd be another 10,000 names on the wall. And my only thing is I wish that the dogs who never were allowed to come home, that their names were on there too, because they were soldiers and they died in Vietnam, and not always in action, but by the hands of the military, but still so we need a wall for all the scout dogs.
Terry, I think that's something that's important and that people don't know about. Can you talk about what happened to scout dogs that served in the military at the end of the war?
Not just scout dogs, but sentry dogs and tracker dogs also. All the dogs that were sent by the military to Vietnam, of the 4,000 dogs, there were only like 220 that early on in the Vietnam War returned to the United States. After that, none of them did. They said it was because of diseases, but in reality, it turned out to be that they considered them excess equipment like helicopters and weapons and so forth. And there were three choices that they did with the dogs. One, they would just let them go to fend for themselves. Not a good fate. Two, they'd give them to the ARVNs, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, scout dog handlers, but most likely those dogs were a big dinner for their families. And thirdly, the United States veterinarians euthanized them. And in the case of Prince, our unit was deactivated in July of 1971, just a few months after I left country. And their orders were to send them to Saigon, to the main vet clinic, and be assessed for reassignment. But a few years ago, I met with our lieutenant that was over there, and he told us that all 42 of them were euthanized. So, you know, you take a 5-year-old dog that's very active, very good at what they're doing, and all the others, and instead of letting them come back and hopefully be with their handlers like they are nowadays, they put them down or the other. So it was, you know, at the time, right after Vietnam, it wasn't so traumatic because we didn't know that for about 30 some years. But in the last 10 years or so, for most of us dog handlers, it's been very traumatic and has really increased our PTSD problems.
Can you talk a little bit about the shift in terms of how we treat dogs who serve now? You mentioned it. You mentioned it in that last piece, but just most of them come home now, correct?
That's correct. They come home and they mostly go to Lackland Air Force Base to be debriefed or whatever you call it before they can be adopted out. And then they are allowed to be adopted out with their handlers being the first one to have choice. And after that, it would be to the public. That's, of course, if the dog is the type of dog that can be with a family. Some of the sentry dogs maybe couldn't do that. But because of dog handlers, of the 10,000 dog handlers, I don't know how many, but there were many of us that did things after about 30 some years when we found out in 1999 what actually was happening to the dogs. We gathered together in groups and so forth. And finally, it ended up that a proposition or whatever it's called was signed by President Clinton at the time, allowing dogs to come back. So prior to 1999 or 2000, whatever the year was, none of the dogs were able to come back, even from other places. So the Vietnam veterans feel good that Vietnam dog handlers feel good that what we did will make a difference for the future, for the dogs and the handlers in the future.
Absolutely. And would you have taken Prince if he could have come home with you?
In a heartbeat, absolutely. I know he wouldn't have been with me now. I mean, he's here, he's in my mind now, in my heart, but he would have. And you know, talking about Prince a little bit, I just happen to have a picture here. This is, I don't know if you can see that or if it's too much glare, but
we can see it, Terry, and we can also, I have some, so we'll upload them online too when we do the podcast. Yeah.
You know, Prince, of course, in my mind, was the best scout dog, but they were all good, and they deserved to come home. That they didn't get that chance. So, you know, we dog handlers, many of us have emotionally paid that price. And I know that all Vietnam veterans have paid some emotional price. We just had one more issue to deal with.
Is there a specific day or specific memory that you have of Prince that really stays clear in your mind?
I do, and it has nothing to do with warfare, basically. We were out in the field, and we had set up for the night, and of course, we didn't, you know, they give these pictures of people having tents and so forth. I had a poncho. That's what Prince and I had, was a poncho. And we were all set for the night, and at night I would hook my leash that I had to my rucksack and to Prince so that he would have about a 5-foot radius, but not being able to go where he wandered. Not that he would, but just in case. And when I would first get to a unit, I would let Prince smell everyone there. And I always told them that at night, Prince is very protective of me. You know, so here's this wonderful, laughing, happy, wag his tail dog, but at night he was he was going to protect me. And during one night, the medic in the unit walked within the distance of that leash, and Prince bit him in the rear end. And so it just shows that one of the reasons why we're so close with these dogs is that not only when they were working, but just when they were resting, they were protecting us also.
I know that Prince influenced your life when you came home from Vietnam. Can you talk about what it was like for you coming home?
Just before coming home, I turned Prince over to another handler, and I was still at the 39th for about 2 weeks, but I could not see Prince. I could not talk loud enough so he would hear me because he was trying to get used to a new handler. But tell you the truth, at that time, that wasn't what was bothering me or anything, because I was going home. I was excited. I was getting out of Vietnam. So, at that time, leaving a dog there was, unfortunately, at the time, it was secondary in my mind. My first thing was, I get to go back to the real world. And I did that. And for all those years afterwards, until 1999, when the movie or whatever it was called, War Dogs, came out, a documentary. Most of us handlers didn't talk. We didn't get together, handlers. We didn't talk about our dogs. It was just something in the past, but it was kind of subdued. And then when it came out, that's when we realized what we had done, the guilt of leaving the dogs behind, and the sadness of leaving them behind. And that's when most of us dog handlers, now we were really upset, not only emotionally, but we were mad because at what we found out they had done to the dogs. So coming back to the world was, I think for most Vietnam soldiers at the time, was an exciting time. We had little calendars that knocked down the days until the day you leave, and that type of thing. But after all those years, so 1971 to 1999 for me, it took all those years, 38, I guess that is, for me to realize that I had left Prince behind, and I should have been more vocal about it.
Terry, can you talk about a little bit about the work that you do today with dogs and that you've done kind of over your life with animals?
Well, during my career as a firefighter, I had pets like everybody else, dogs and cats, and I didn't think of them as scout dogs, that's for sure. They were spoiled pets, and then when I retired, and I've retired 3 different times, finally, just recently, I've been told that by the VA, I no longer can work, so I can volunteer though. So I volunteer at the local, I hope that sound's not bothering you in the background. Okay. The local county domestic animal services, try and get that right. I go there 3 times a week and I walk dogs. And we sit with them, we walk them, we pet them, we bathe them, anything to be around these dogs. And since I've got a background of dealing with larger dogs, and a lot of the people are smaller women, I get to walk all the larger dogs, and it's been very helpful for me. Part of my cathartic recovery from PTSD has been good. And I must say the wall has been part of that recovery too. So I get to do that. And in fact, it was almost 50 years to the day that I left country, or left Prince, that I was at the dog center and I walked for the first time another German Shepherd. And I've got a picture of that, and it didn't look like Prince at all, but it felt like Prince. So it was, for that moment, I was back with Prince.
Terry, I want to switch gears for a second and talk about your career when you came home. When you came home from Vietnam, you became a firefighter. What inspired you to take on that career?
Well, a couple things. One, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a fireman. I didn't want to be a doctor or lawyer or anything. I want to be a fireman. So shortly after I got back from Vietnam, in the small community where I lived in Minnesota, I joined the volunteer fire department, and I was in my glory. And the other side of it was I've always been a caregiver. I wanted to help people and so forth. So I was really fulfilling a lot of roles. And the other thing it provided was camaraderie, which when you come back from Vietnam, at least for me, I came back alone. I mean, I was in a plane with 300 guys, but I didn't know any of them. And we all came back, not as a unit, but as individuals. And so we didn't have that camaraderie. So the fire department provided all those things for me. And then a couple years later, there was a position opened up at a outside Minneapolis suburb at a full-time department, and I was able to get hired there and became a firefighter and a paramedic, and eventually the assistant fire chief. So I fulfilled my lifelong dream doing that. So I was very fortunate.
When you came home, Terry, a lot of people came home from Vietnam and didn't experience the welcome home that they deserved. What was your experience coming back to Minnesota, I'm guessing?
Right. My actual experience, I had heard about, the signs being up and the spitting at people and calling names and so forth. I did not personally witness that. I knew it was going on. You can't, you hear about it. I was fortunate when I landed at the airport in Minneapolis. My parents, that was back when you could go down to the gates. My parents were there to greet me. And my dad was a veteran in the Navy in World War II. And my mom was kind of a veteran. Her former husband was in the Army, in the Special Service Force, first Special Service Force, get that right. He was killed by a sniper in France in 1944. So her love of her life was killed, and so she was into the Army. My dad was into the Navy, and they both thought it was a wonderful thing. And it probably, for me, the rest of my life, the things I learned in the Army too were good for me also. So I can't say that it was bad returning. However, I will say that whenever people would see me that I knew before, they would say, "Well, hi, Terry. Well, I'm glad you're back." And they kind of had the impression that, like, how was your vacation? Not how was it at war? They had no idea, which I can understand. And so that was difficult because, one day you're in a war zone, and 2 days later, for me, I was a civilian. I mean, no readjustment or anything. It's just like, okay, welcome back to civilian life. It doesn't work that way. I still haven't totally adjusted to civilian life. This is 50 some years later. So that was a difficult thing. But I must say, and I got to say a little bit about the wall that heals, been very helpful to me to get over that, and we can expound on that if you like. And also, the VA has vet centers around the country that provide counseling for soldiers after they come back from where they were, and that has been tremendously helpful to me. Mostly what I did was what most soldiers do when they come back from a war zone, is they drink and party and do stupid things, and they don't even kind of realize why they're doing that. They just think that, that's the thing to do, but it really is to cover up where we have been. And that's where going to the wall and the vet center has really opened things up for me.
Terry, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the wall that heals.
Okay.
Terry, I met you on Marco Island,
Right.
where
Right.
you and your wife now live
Right.
full time.
That's correct.
No more cold winters.
No more cold winter. No.
And we met because I was out working with the Wall That Heals, which is our replica of the wall,
Right.
and our 55-foot education center that travel around the country. You were our very first stop and one of our only stops in 2020.
Right.
And so I felt really lucky that we had the opportunity to meet in February.
Me
And
too.
so, yeah, right. And so when we met and I learned that you were a dog handler, you're one of the first dog handlers that I had met, but we had recently redone the inside of our trailer and had told the story of the first dog handler killed in Vietnam, a man named George Bevich.
Right.
And so we spoke at length about Prince and about your service in Vietnam. But you really connected with the wall in a lot of ways. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And also, I guess, you really connected with the wall that heals, I should say, in a lot of ways, not just the wall itself.
Well, that's right. When I was part of the American Legion that was helping with the wall, and I'm sure they do that around the country. So I was there as a guide to people to try to take them to where names are on the wall and that sort of thing. And I did it. It was there for 4 days, and I did it for all 4 days. But on the Saturday, on the weekend, I had made a replica of kind of a cutout of a dog and a thing that I was going to leave at the wall for Prince. And I was sitting at the wall, cross-legged. I still remember looking at the wall, and right in front of me was the name of a guy I went to high school with in Burbank, California. His name is Larry Maxon. His name was on the wall, and I knew him pretty well in high school. And he actually was killed in Vietnam and was given the Medal of Honor. So he did some really things. So I thought, what better place to sit at the wall than where Larry was and talk to Prince? Because I never had that opportunity to really say goodbye to Prince. So that's what I was doing. And while I was there, beside you seeing me and everything else, a reporter from a local news company asked me after I got up from the wall if they could interview me. And I said, of course. And so they did, something similar to what we're doing now, except that it was live, a lot of it. And many times, I mean, it went on for a few hours. Anyway, the next day when I went back on Sunday, I thought I was going to be doing what I was supposed to be doing. And it turned out that all these people were coming up to me and saying, are you the dog handler that was on TV last night? And they were asking me all these questions. And it just worked out that I talked about Prince and scout dogs all day long. It was so cathartic. I mean, it was the first time in all those years that I could talk about Prince without breaking down, which I'm doing right now a little bit, but it was really the first time. And since then, after the wall left, I have given many talks and talked to anyone that wants to talk about them on the phone, anything about how important the dogs were in Vietnam. And I know we did the piece for Veterans Day back in November, and I guess I'm in tune now with the wall, that it has really helped me because I do suffer from PTSD, as I've mentioned, and between that medication and the vet center, I'm doing really well now, or at least I think I am, according to what I see. I'm doing well. I still get somewhat emotional when I talk about Prince, but overall, I'm not suicidal anymore. I'm not drinking anymore. I can give you a whole bunch of things that I'm not doing anymore, which is good. And so, fortunate for me, you and the wall came along, the vet center came along, and I can't say any more about it than that those are very good things in my life. And I just want to say that for anyone that doesn't know about the wall that heals, I'm telling people all the time how important it is. And I understand the anxiety they feel before going to it, but I also understand the jubilation feeling they have going after it leaves, after they're leaving it. It's scary. And a lot of people had mentioned that to me when I was working at the wall, that they were veterans and they were afraid to go to it. And I've told other people, and I said, it's so awesome that they need to go because it will change some of the emotional feelings they have. It's terrific. And I laud you and the whole group. You were so nice to me when we met at the wall, you and Tim and Heidi. And it was a great time. As difficult as it was a great time. And I owe a debt of gratitude to all of you. I really do.
Oh, well, Terry, thank you.